There's a moment in every great story where the underdog gets a chance to cash in, to take the money, to finally get what they deserve. And then there's the rarer moment, the one that actually changes history, where they look that offer dead in the eye and say no. This is that story. $300 million. Sitting on a table, waiting for a signature. And Alex just walked away. But to understand why she did it, you have to go back to where it all started, to a city where courts had sagging nets and dreams were just slightly too big for the budget to hold. Alex wasn't born into the polished world of professional tennis. She didn't grow up with biomechanics coaches analyzing her footwork or climate-controlled training facilities built just for her. She grew up in Quezon City, practicing in Manila's relentless humidity, her family piecing together whatever they could to fund trips abroad for tournaments that the rest of the world took for granted. But there was something in her, something that caught the attention of Globe Telecom when she was just 8 years old. Not millions. Not some massive flashy deal. Just enough belief in a kid with fire behind her eyes to keep the dream alive a little longer. And that mattered more than anyone realized at the time. Fast forward to 2022. Alex is 16, and she's been quietly tearing through junior circuits across Europe with a kind of calm ferocity that doesn't announce itself, it just wins. Then she steps onto the courts of the US Open Girls Singles Championship, and she does something that had never been done before in Philippine sports history. She wins. The first Filipino to ever capture a junior Grand Slam singles title. And just like that, everything shifted. Basketball fans in the Philippines, people who had never once cared about tennis, were suddenly glued to their screens, talking about this girl from Quezon City who just rewrote the record books. The headlines were everywhere. And predictably, the brands started circling. Some came genuinely. Others came for something else entirely. There was one corporation, let's call them Titan Sports, a multinational equipment giant with 70 years of history and billions in valuation, that sent representatives to Spain, where Alex was training at the Rafael Nadal Academy. Polished executives, rehearsed smiles, the whole performance. They talked about exciting partnership opportunities and shared visions and the future of the sport. But when the paperwork landed in front of Alex's family, the truth was right there between the lines. $60,000 a year. That's what they were offering a Grand Slam champion. A 3-year equipment deal totaling $180,000 for an athlete whose face could move millions of dollars worth of product across Southeast Asia alone. Alex's father Michael, a former collegiate player himself, read it carefully. Her mother Riza, who had her own history in competitive swimming and knew exactly what athletic exploitation looked like, shook her head. Because buried inside those terms was something far more concerning than the low number. Titan Sports wanted her image rights. They wanted to approve her social media. They wanted to dictate her schedule. They wanted to position her as their diversity ambassador, their access point into markets they hadn't been able to crack, while offering her a fraction of what they routinely paid Western athletes with half her achievements. When the family pushed back and asked to be treated with the same respect they'd show any other champion, Titan's tone changed fast. The polished smiles got tighter. The conversation turned into something that felt more like a lecture. There were comments about gratitude, about realistic expectations for someone from the Philippines, about understanding how the market actually worked. And then, 48 hours later, the email arrived. Professional language. Cold as marble. After careful consideration, we've decided to pursue partnerships more aligned with our current brand strategy. Which, translated out of corporate speak, meant exactly this. We assumed you were desperate enough to take whatever we offered, and since you're not, we're done here. That night, Alex cried. Not over the money, her family had managed without it and would continue to. She cried because she understood something at 16 that she shouldn't have had to learn that young. That talent alone doesn't unlock every door. That there are rooms in the sports industry where gatekeepers who've never competed at anything decide what an athlete's worth is, and they make that calculation not based on trophies or rankings or potential, but on projected returns and demographic spreadsheets and assumptions about who deserves to be taken seriously. She didn't post about it, didn't vent publicly. She kept it internal, let it settle into something harder than anger. A decision. Prove them catastrophically wrong. And then she went back to work. What followed over the next 4 years was not a comeback, because she had never fallen. It was an elevation so sharp and sustained that the people who had dismissed her couldn't look away even when they wanted to. The 2025 season became the year the rest of the world caught up to what her family had always known. Miami Open, March 2025, and Alex walks onto the court against a 5-time Grand Slam champion, someone who had spent years at the very top of women's tennis, and she doesn't just win. She dismantles her. Straight sets. Aggressive baseline play so precisely executed that commentators ran out of words for it. When the final point landed, when Alex dropped her racket and screamed up at the sky, the thousands of Filipino fans who had flown to Florida to watch her erupted like something that had been building for years had finally broken through the surface. Because it had. Sponsors had been watching. Nike expanded their partnership. Babolat designed a signature racket built around her game. Bank of the Philippine Islands launched nationwide campaigns with her face at the center. But more telling than any individual deal was what was happening to the numbers in the background. Television ratings for WTA matches across Southeast Asia quadrupled on the days Alex competed. Merchandise with her name sold out in hours. The demographic that Titan Sports had once quietly dismissed as not strategic enough had become the fastest-growing consumer base in tennis, and they were spending their money everywhere except with the brand that had turned their icon away. Eastbourne, June 2025. Alex reaches her first WTA Tour final. First Filipina ever to do it. She loses to Daria Kasatkina in a tight championship match, but nobody watching that day walked away thinking about the loss. They were watching something take shape. Wimbledon came next, and though she exits in the first round against the defending champion, the moment that goes globally viral isn't a scoreline. It's an accessory. Nike had crafted her a custom hair tie shaped like sampaguita blossoms, the national flower of the Philippines. That small detail, that deliberate nod to where she came from, gets photographed from every angle, picked up by outlets worldwide, and replicas sell out before manufacturers can even keep pace with the demand. September 2025, Guadalajara. Alex wins the WTA 125 Singles Championship, becoming the first Filipina to claim a WTA Challenger-level title. Career prize money crosses $1 million. Rankings push into the top 30. And inside Titan Sports' Southeast Asian division, something close to panic is quietly taking hold. Internal emails that surfaced years later painted a picture of a marketing department watching its market share bleed out in slow motion. Their regional ambassadors, the athletes they'd signed instead of Alex, generated almost no engagement. Campaign after campaign flopped. Babolat's racket, the one Alex played with, had become the best-selling model in the region. A Nike limited edition shirt designed by Filipino artist Georgina Camus sold out in 11 minutes. 11. Meanwhile, Titan Sports couldn't give product away in the markets they'd once written off as not worth investing in fairly. 40% of projected growth in Asian tennis equipment sales was now territory they'd locked themselves out of permanently. The question circulating through corporate meetings became something like a horror story that kept replaying. How do we fix this? The answer they came up with was audacious, bordering on delusional. February 2026, Titan Sports' new CEO Richard Ashford boards a flight to Abu Dhabi, where Alex is competing in the Mubadala Open. He watches from a luxury box as Filipino fans, thousands of them who had traveled internationally just to watch her play, transform a formal WTA venue into something that feels like home for her. The energy is visceral. After her quarter-final victory, Ashford doesn't go through agents or formal channels. He walks into the players' lounge, champagne in hand, and introduces himself. Alex, exhausted from competition and focused on recovery, agrees to hear him out. The contract he slides across the table is $300 million over 10 years. $30 million annually. Numbers that would place her among the highest-paid athletes in tennis anywhere in the world. On paper, it looks like vindication. But Maria Gonzalez, Alex's agent, starts reading the actual terms and her expression doesn't change into a smile. It doesn't change at all, which is its own kind of answer. Titan Sports wanted exclusive equipment rights, comprehensive image licensing, mandatory quarterly corporate appearances, creative approval over her social media content, and the ability to dictate which tournaments she entered based on their marketing calendar rather than her competitive strategy. The money was enormous. The cost was her career. And then Ashford had the nerve to say, with a straight face, that he had always believed in her potential, that the earlier rejection had simply been a matter of timing, that their previous conversation had been strategic patience on their part. The gaslighting was extraordinary. He was rewriting a dismissive email sent to a 16-year-old who had just asked to be treated fairly into some kind of calculated long game. Filipino media caught wind of the negotiations and the country lit up. Headlines celebrated prematurely. Basketball legend Alex Eala, Alex's uncle, issued a quiet but pointed public statement. Read the fine print. Money means nothing if it costs your freedom. Titan Sports, sensing they were losing the narrative, leaked the negotiation figures to business press outlets, positioning themselves as generous benefactors offering historic opportunity to a deserving athlete. The framing was fiction. Alex's 2025 earnings had already surpassed $650,000 in prize money alone, with existing sponsorships adding substantial income on top. She wasn't a struggling athlete waiting to be saved. She was ascending on her own terms, and they needed her far more desperately than she needed their billions. Ashford followed her from tournament to tournament. Dubai. Then Indian Wells. The persistence crossed a line that felt less like recruitment and more like pressure. Alex asked for 72 hours to decide. 3 days that the entire Philippines seemed to hold its breath through. 3 days of columnists and pundits and comment sections all offering opinions about what the right choice was. And then March 15, 2026, Indian Wells, California. Press conference. Cameras everywhere. The room assumed she was announcing a partnership. What she announced instead was something that would echo through sports business for a generation. Her voice didn't waver once. 4 years ago, she told them, when she had just won the US Open Girls Singles Championship, Titan Sports told her she wasn't worth investing in fairly. They offered $60,000 a year with terms designed to control her entire career. When her family asked for respect, they received a form rejection email. Now she was ranked in the top 30, had defeated Grand Slam champions, and had reached WTA finals. Now they were calling her worth $300 million. But the contract didn't sponsor her. It purchased her. It dictated her schedule, controlled her image permanently, and reduced her to a marketing asset dressed up in historic numbers. She paused. The room was completely still. She said she had worked too hard, climbed too far, and broken too many barriers to hand any of that over for any price. Her career belonged to her, to the Philippines, and to everyone who had believed in her when the suits hadn't. Titan Sports could keep their $300 million. Richard Ashford, watching from headquarters, reportedly put his fist through his laptop. Titan Sports stock dropped within hours as investors grasped the scale of the public relations catastrophe. The hashtag #RespectAlex trended globally. Serena Williams tweeted that knowing your worth was priceless. Naomi Osaka posted that some things matter more than money, and the word she used was respect. Nike restructured their existing deal within 24 hours, enhancing terms while respecting everything she'd stood for publicly. Babolat followed. Adidas came forward with something that looked genuinely different: fair compensation, creative input on Filipino-inspired product designs, scheduling flexibility, no image rights colonization. She signed within weeks. Their stock ticked up 3% the day the announcement dropped. Titan Sports responded the way companies do when they know they've lost. They fed anonymous gossip to industry columns, suggesting Alex was difficult, that she'd been poorly advised, that she'd thrown away generational wealth out of pride. The retaliation was predictable and it was pathetic, and almost nobody bought it. Because what was impossible to ignore was the ripple moving outward from her decision. Young athletes on ITF circuits started wearing bracelets with 3 letters on them. Dignity over profit. The phrase became a reference point. When brands approached junior players with predatory contracts, they'd cite what Alex had done and either demand revisions or walk away entirely. 15-year-olds had leverage their predecessors couldn't have imagined, because a 20-year-old from Quezon City had shown them that standing firm actually worked. Titan Sports withdrew from Southeast Asian markets 6 months after the rejection. Their regional division dissolved. Hundreds of jobs gone, because 4 years earlier some executives in a room decided a teenage Filipino champion wasn't worth treating fairly. Richard Ashford resigned 9 months after Alex's press conference. Business schools started building case studies around what had happened. Universities invited Alex to lecture on athlete empowerment. The United Nations Youth Assembly asked for her participation in conversations about economic exploitation in sports. The girl corporations had written off as not marketable enough had become the most influential figure in sports business. And not in spite of refusing $300 million, but precisely because she had. By early 2026, Alex sits at world number 12. 3 WTA titles. 2 Grand Slam quarterfinals. Over $8 million in career prize money. An endorsement portfolio generating $12 million annually from partners who chose collaboration over control. Filipino kids who had never touched a racket were flooding into academies. Courts were being built in provinces that had never hosted a tournament. The Philippine Tennis Association's membership quadrupled. A scholarship pipeline at the Nadal Academy was created specifically for Southeast Asian juniors, inspired directly by what Alex's journey had proved was possible. Some still argue she left too much money on the table, that she could have negotiated better terms within the Titan deal and used the wealth for something larger than herself. Those arguments miss the point entirely. Capitulation dressed up as compromise still surrenders power. And sometimes the only proportionate response to disrespect is a clean, total, unconditional no, regardless of the cost. Alex herself rarely brings it up anymore. She said what needed to be said on that March afternoon in Indian Wells. Her focus is tennis, the rankings, the Grand Slams, the next match. But sometimes, after a win, in the quiet before the noise of celebration fully arrives, she thinks about the 16-year-old who read that dismissal email in her dormitory and cried. She thinks about what that girl believed about herself in that moment. And then she looks at the trophy, or the crowd, or the flags, and she knows something that no corporate valuation ever captured. She was always enough. The corporations were the ones who weren't. Alex didn't just reject $300 million. She rejected the whole framework that told athletes from smaller nations to be grateful for scraps, to accept less, to shrink themselves to fit what others had decided they were worth. And in doing that, she changed the negotiating table for everyone who came after her. The legacy isn't measured in dollars declined. It's measured in barriers that no longer exist. This story isn't finished. It's barely past the opening chapters. Make sure you're here for what comes next, because Alex Eala is just getting started.